So we'll spend about 15-20 minutes. I'll try and give you some of the knowledge that I've acquired in terms of the different kinds of roles that are available in the industry. So if you think about some of the most popular roles in data science, you've got business analyst, and we're starting from entry level roles. So this part of the discussion is going to be around 15 to 20 minutes. We're starting off with entry level roles. So two of the popular entry level roles that you'll find in data science are business analyst and data analyst. You've then got some more advanced roles like ML engineer, data scientist, AI experts. Now, these would be some of the most popular roles that you would find in data science. Now, we try and understand exactly what kind of skills are actually required to get into these kinds of roles. So as far as the first two roles are concerned, I would typically call them entry-level roles, great for people who are just entering the space. For people who are transitioning from another background, if you've got somewhere in the range of 2 to 5 years of experience, business analyst or data analyst positions could be some of the useful positions that you could try and get into. The kind of skills from a technical point of view that are required for either of the two roles are similar. You would need some knowledge of a visualization tool, popular ones being Power BI, Tableau. So you need some sense of visualization tools. You need a little knowledge of a programming language, at least one programming language. You would need a little bit of knowledge in stats and machine learning, and entry level knowledge in stats and machine learning. Plus you need to be able to work with database languages like SQL or MongoDB. So as long as you've acquired a certain kind of technical stack where you've got knowledge of one visualization tool, the visualization tool could be Power BI, Tableau, Amazon QuickSight, there's Google Data Studio, there's so many tools. The popular ones are Power BI and Tableau. So knowledge of one of the visualization tools that helps you represent data pictorially in the form of graphs and charts, such that it's easily ingestible for the business. Businesses can learn and relate from it quickly. So knowledge of a visualization tool, knowledge of programming language to perform automations to make your tasks faster and simpler. So you need knowledge of one programming language. Now, some of the programming languages, the popular ones would be Python and R. So you need knowledge of one programming language. Entry level basic knowledge of statistics and machine learning would suffice, plus knowledge of a database tool like SQL or MongoDB. Now, with this technical stack, with maybe a couple of projects in your resume, you'd be able to start applying for business analyst or kinds of roles. Now for the data analyst, the technical stack remains the same. Tech stack is same. The difference between the role of a business analyst and the role of a data analyst is in the part of the company that they're affiliated to. So business analysts typically work with the business side of the organization, trying to analyze things like sales, inventory, supply chain. So things that are related to the business side of the organization, operational side of the organization. So all those kinds of analysis, data analysis that is done inside a company is typically handled by business analysts, whereas data analysts are more involved in the product side of the organization. So mostly working on product features, which features are working well, which features need to be updated, which features are seeing a lot of bugs. So whenever you're dealing on mostly technical or product data, that's when the kind of role that you're getting into as a data scientist would be called a data analyst. So that's the data analyst kind of role. From the technical stack point of view, the technical stack remains the same. Please try and not scribe on this page. So you've got the ability, but I would like if you can stay away from that. Thank you. So the technical stack remains the same, but it's in the part of the company that you're working with. Whether you're working with the business side of the organization or the technical side, you'd either be called a business analyst or a data analyst. These are good entry level positions to try and apply for when you're new to this space. Once you've stayed in these roles for some time, and now this is an advice that I would give typically to freshers, people who are just out of their colleges or in their colleges who are preparing for these kinds of roles or preparing for a career in data science. They should probably approach these entry level roles to begin with. You've then got some more advanced roles in data science, which would require an additional sort of stack getting added to your knowledge set, starting from advanced machine learning to a little bit of deep learning, natural language processing. If you add this technical stack, you can either go for ML engineer role or a data scientist role. So an addition of certain core ideas in data science, the knowledge of machine learning algorithms that help you model different kinds of processes, model different kinds of relationships, and generate valuable insights so that businesses can benefit out of it. So for that, you'd need to learn some of the core areas in machine learning, deep learning, and natural language processing. Now, to become an AI expert, that's one step forward. That would require additional knowledge in computer vision, reinforcement learning, risk management. Now, these would be some additional areas where you would need to get a lot of knowledge based on which you'd be able to go for these most advanced kinds of roles, which means that the order in which I've written down these roles would sort of give you a sense of what is the precedence of skills that you would typically like and acquire, which means that business analysts, data analysts, these are entry-level roles where when you're entering into this space as a fresher, as a person who's just begun, these are the kinds of roles that you should typically be looking at. Once you've stayed in this space for some time, if you're working professional already, who's already working as a business analyst, you could directly go for an ML engineer role or a data scientist role, which would require more advanced modeling knowledge. But the knowledge in itself is important. You've got to acquire a full stack knowledge sort of scenario where you know a lot of things and you know how to apply them in different spaces, different industries. That is what was going to add the real value. But as far as transition from level of complexity of the role, level of seniority that is expected in a role, you would go in this pattern from a data analyst or a business analyst to ML engineers, data scientists, and then to the next level with more experience and with more knowledge of more advanced tools in data science. You'd probably be going in as AI experts in different companies or different scenarios. So in terms of gradation, this is how it would look like. Now there are some questions in the comments. I'm going to go through some of these questions. All right. So certificate for attending the test, I think don't worry about that. Like I said, you'll get a mail where you'll get linked to a test. If you do well in that test, a certificate will be provided. For that, you should go through the recordings of the day that you've missed, and you should go through today's session. As long as you're doing that, you should be good to go. You should be able to get the certificate. All right. Most of the companies are looking for data analysts with the VBA, macro, and SQL. So what's your opinion? So like I said, in these kinds of roles, which are the entry level roles, knowledge of advanced Excel could also be very helpful. No matter how much people try and deny it, Excel is still one of the most used tools when it comes to data analysis, which is why people look for those kinds of skills as well. But it depends on the kind of trajectory you want to take in your career. So if you want to get into a modeling role, you should try and build a resume like that. If you're still in college and there's no hurry to get a role, I would recommend that you acquire full stack learning. You learn about the models, you learn about advanced machine learning, you learn about those techniques as well, the core areas as well, so that when you're getting into a role, you're in a better position from a knowledge point of view at least. So when you actually work, you can then show and develop intent. You can show that you worked in this space in relevant kinds of projects. But if you do not know the real skills that are required to get more advanced roles in data science, you're more likely to get stuck in a position that you're getting into, which means that if you really want to have a steeper growth curve, I would recommend that you go for the full stack of skills. Try and learn some of the core areas in data science, try and learn them from an application point of view, learn as much as possible about how these ideas actually get applied in different areas, in different industries, different businesses. As long as you're able to develop that intuition as part of your learning, it's a good idea, at least when there's no hurry to get a job. If you've already graduated and you're looking for a role, I would recommend, acquiring the most sought after skills, which would be starting from advanced Excel to visualization tools, one programming language, if not a very high level of proficiency, then basic language comfort and basic acquaintance with programming language, at least one of them, and some basic knowledge of statistics and machine learning. As quick as possible, you try and acquire these skills, which if you're following a guided program, we offer a program where we cover these skills in somewhere around 3 months and would get you ready for applying for those kinds of roles, which means that the kinds of skills that are required for just the beginning bit, the entry level roles, might be acquired in 3 or 4 months. And you should probably target it in that way. If you're looking to get into data science, you're already working, or you've just gotten out, you don't have a job right now, and there's an urgency to get into a role, I believe you should go for the most sought after skills, which would be the ones that I've written out in business analyst and data analyst. I think that'd be a good trajectory for you. All right. I hope I've answered your question. How about the roles for senior folks having 15 plus of year experience with 2 to 3 years of relevant experience? See, the moment you come with experience, there are two things to your work that matter. One is the actual technical work that you've been doing. Now, either that is relevant to data science or that is not relevant to data science. If it is relevant, like you say, there are about 2 or 3 years where there is relevant experience. In that case, that is something that you must leverage in your interviews. That is something that you must leverage to get into a good data science position. But other than that, there's part of the 15 years that you can use no matter what, which is knowledge of the industry, knowledge of the business. Now, as a person who's been in the industry for about 15 years, the knowledge that you acquired for the spaces that you worked in, let's say you worked in healthcare. Now, healthcare is a place or a space which has seen immense applications for data science, which means that we're trying to get into a more functional data science role inside healthcare. The experience that you have accumulated in these 15 years is going to be very helpful in getting you a good position. You can go for the most advanced positions with the knowledge and experience of the space and how the industry functions. You'd always be better placed than a person who's not worked in that industry, but might be a very good data scientist. So this is something that you'll realize about data science. The more you get into it, the more you work in data science, you'll realize that there's no real substitute for knowledge and domain understanding. This is something that is not so true for a lot of other fields, but is immensely true for data science. The more you understand the space that you're working for, the better the data scientist you are. A simple analogy would be if you take the best data scientist in healthcare and you suddenly put him inside banking, there's a good chance that he'll do worse than some of the most moderate workers in that space. For the simple reason that he doesn't understand the space, he does not have the technical know-how and the general understanding of the industry to become a good data scientist, which means that in the 15 years that you worked, there's one that is the technical work that you've done, and whether that is relevant or not, the larger fraction of that work that you can show as relevant, the better it is for that transition. If that is not really in favor with you, or it is in favor with you, and you probably go with the experience that you acquired and start leveraging that learning. So the industries that you worked in, let's say you worked in banking for some time, you worked in insurance for some time, you worked in those kinds of industries where there are a lot of applications for data science. I think healthcare is one of the most exciting places where data science is seeing huge applications. So Pramod, I think your question has a very direct answer. Healthcare, the immense number of opportunities. So does banking, so does insurance, so do a lot of other sectors, right from manufacturing to retail, almost all industries. Data science is something that has found its value, and people have found its value in almost all spaces, all industries, all functional areas, which means that there is a use case almost everywhere. So what part of your learning, what part of your knowledge of the industry can you leverage to get into these roles will decide how good a role you get into, which means that transition does not only depend on knowledge, it depends on how well you are able to structure your search. Depending on the profile that you've worked in, depending on what you've done in the 15 or 20 years that you worked, the more you worked, always that's a common rule of thumb that it's difficult to make transitions, which means that you've got to be very smart about that transition. For freshers, it's relatively easier. Hiring managers do not have a lot of risk that they're putting into. It's a small bet hiring a fresher versus hiring somebody with 15 years of experience at a position where he's necessarily influencing the direction of the company, not just involved in the execution of things. You're mostly involved in the direction of how the company goes. So in those positions, there's a higher risk that companies take, which means that they expect something that is much more. And therefore, you've got to be able to use your knowledge of the industry that you worked in and you're leveraging into a new role. So that is something that you've got to take care of. I hope I've answered your question. Nihar wants to talk about the attendance link. You don't need an attendance link. Zoom, we are able to get that information directly from Zoom. As long as you're on the call, we are able to extract that information. So you don't have to worry about attendance. So as a business analyst fresher, while preparing for job, should we acquire domain knowledge too? Again, it's like, should I get some vitamin C if I'm trying to prevent myself from contracting COVID? You should. It's a good thing. If you're trying to get into data science, obviously you should try your best to know as much of the domain that you're trying to apply into. Coming off as a person who knows his thing is always a good thing for an interview. So when an interviewer asks you, why do you want to get into HSBC? You need to have a solid reason for that. As long as you've got a solid reason for that, and that solid reason comes out of knowledge and understanding of the space, which means that if you know what kind of roles you're getting into, you're hoping to get into, the ones that you're going to target, you must try and learn as much about the domain as possible. That's In fact, it's strange that you pointed that out. It's one of the key tenets on which we've built our program. So the program that we offer has domain expertise and domain training as a separate add-on feature that is something that we really care about. So unless you really understand the space that you're trying to get into, you do not come off as a person who knows his thing. And that is something that is really important for interviews. You need to come off as a person who knows what he's doing. And when you get into a role without, in a half-baked way, when you don't know exactly what the jobs, the roles and the responsibilities are, what is the kind of work that you might be doing on a day-to-day basis. If you don't know that about your role, that can obviously be a problem. So you must know as much about your domain as possible. But I must say that the yardsticks on which working professionals and people with experience are judged are much more stringent, which means that even with a very basic level of understanding as a fresher, you might get through. But as a person who is coming with experience, that's an absolute no. So a person with 5 years of experience trying to apply for a data science role in banking must know how banking works. If he doesn't, it's very difficult for him to do that transition. Whereas for freshers, a lot of times companies are willing to take that risk. As long as you come off as a person who is technically sound, who knows his thing when it comes to machine learning and when it comes to the kind of technical work that has to be done, as long as that is sound, companies are happy to go with it, as long as it's a fresher, because there's a very smaller risk attached to it. So I think that is a little sort of intuitive. I hope I've answered your question as well, Apurva. Ankur says, if we were to switch the domain track, let's say from healthcare to banking, if I undergo a few of the available case studies available on Kaggle, would that be enough to change? That again depends on your level of experience. A person with 10 years of experience cannot write Kaggle projects on his resume and say that, this is the basis on which I want to get a transition. So I think this is one of the main reasons and one of the fundamental founding principles based on which SkillSlash was created actually. So the program that we offer for working professionals, we allow them to do freelance work, our learners to do freelance work over a period of 3 to 6 months with some of the best startups in the country, so that they can add some freelance work that is data science related. So people who are coming from unrelated backgrounds, they can add that work to their resume, and then when they put that portfolio out in the market, that really stands out. People care about what you've done, because when you're able to show both of that, when you're able to show some relevant work, there's no real substitute for credibility in that case. That's the best kind of credibility that you can create. As for freshers, as for people who are coming right out of college, we do offer an internship as part of our program in order to help you get acquainted with some kind of industry experience. But those benchmarks are a little more easier for freshers as compared to, because people know, hiring managers know that when you're hiring somebody out of a college, you do not expect him to be experienced in the trials and tribulations of actual, company work. So because they've not gotten a lot of exposure to it other than interviews, internships. So I think internships is one good way for freshers and college students to actually explore and build some relevant background in data science. But as long as that is not happening, I think freshers have an easier benchmark to go against. As compared to that, working professionals, the program that we've created, we allow them to work with companies so that they develop actual relevant experience. So you're going into banking, you work with a fintech startup, you work on a project, say, over a period of 1 to 2 months virtually, along with the learning. So that's part of our learning program. So the whole package contains actual work as well. Now, in the case of freshers, what we've done is we've created a 6-month program, a smaller one. The one for the working professionals is 8 to 10 month program, whereas the one for freshers is 6 months. But in those 6 months, we teach as well, we allow you to work, which means that you get an internship certificate for 6 months, wherein you work on actual company work. So we've got an analytics wing which does consulting work for other organizations as well. And we get a lot of work in that respect, and we allow our learners to actually work on those projects. So for freshers, we've created a different setup where you study for 6 months and you get an internship for those 6 months as well, because we are actually getting you work from day one. We make you work on some actual relevant data. We help you go through data science work in the 6 months that you actually work and learn. So it's a work and learn program. So the way we've created our whole company is based on the idea of actual experience. So learning is not enough. That is what we believe in. No matter how much or how good a program you go through, the things that you learn on the job that you just cannot do without actually having worked in the industry. And this is something that professionals understand. This is something that hiring managers understand. So as people who are trying to make these transitions, or as people who are trying to get into these roles, whether we are starting our careers or whether we are in the middle of our careers and we are trying for a switch, we must accept this. People want, as a person who is looking to hire, if I'm trying to hire a Java developer with 5 years of experience, and there are two people who come in front of me, there are two resumes in front of me. One of those people, has worked in a technical space for about 3-4 years, and in the last 6 months, he's done a data science degree from IIT Kanpur, not data science, a Java developer degree from IIT Kanpur, and we're looking for a Java developer. Now, if he's done a degree for 6 months, it's one of the best institutes in the country, so it's a credible degree. And then there's another resume in front of me, wherein the person has actually been in the technical space for a similar kind of time, but for the last 2 years, he's been working as a Java technical lead inside Infosys. He's been working on a client project that works on the Java stack. Now, as a hiring manager, I've got these two resumes in front of me. One person who has no work experience and who's done a degree of 6 months from IIT Kanpur, another person who's been working that space for the last 2 years. If I asked you guys, if you can put it in the comment, do you pick the first resume or the second resume? What do you think? Which resume do you pick up of the two resumes that you have in front of you? Second. So I get two guys have said second, four of them now. Most of you, especially people who already started working, will realize this even more. That most of the hiring managers will pick the second resume because there are things that you learn on the job that you just can't learn otherwise. No matter how much you try, it's difficult to learn things until you actually worked in those spaces, which means that hiring managers much rather prefer people who've actually done the kind of work that is expected in the role that they're applying for beforehand, so that when they get in, it does not take a lot of time to make them adjust, or you do not have to spend a lot of time in training. They can immediately start contributing to the team. So that's the expectation that hiring managers have. This expectation is a little more stringent for working professionals. For freshers, this is a little more laxed. There's more relaxed in this sense, because people know that freshers are people who are just out of colleges. So the best that you guys can do is get internships. So that's how we've structured a program there as well. But yeah, there's no substitute for experience. That is always going to count. So if you're coming with lesser years of experience, it might be okay, say 2 years or 3 years. It might be okay to add a few Kaggle projects and then sit in an interview, and that might still be okay. But if you've got 10 years of experience, doing that will not really work. Opportunities in AI, there are a lot of opportunities, although AI is much more a buzzword than it's a reality. I think there are very few companies in the world that are actually working on artificial intelligence, who've got enough number of engineers and enough size of data to actually be building artificial intelligences. Otherwise, most of it is mostly pizzazz. Just we like to use the term. It sells. It's good for marketing. That's why we say everything is artificial intelligence. Reading an amount out of a message is not really artificial intelligence, but people tout it out to be. They say that your product is artificial intelligence driven or powered. But yeah, there are a lot of roles in that space. The real sense of the term in terms of data science, yeah, I think in terms of opportunities, there's an abundance of opportunities in this space. Way more demand than there is supply. So there are many more positions that have got to be filled as there are a number of talented people to take up those positions, which is why there's such a buzz around this space. So yeah, that part is true. What level of programming should we know? See, there's a basic level of programming prowess that is required. It's not very high because most of the code in data science is modularized. You've got fixed blocks that you can use directly. The code has already been written. These are open source tools, Python and R, which means that a lot of work has already been done by the community of developers. You pick and choose. You pick and choose and use. So that's how most of programming works in data science. But yes, it's indispensable. You cannot go without a programming language. Without the knowledge of programming language, it's not possible to get into data science, which means that you've got to learn it, but you don't need to be an ace programmer to become a good data scientist. Much more than programming, there are other core areas that you've got to focus in. Masters abroad in data science will be worth it or not? If so, what is the Masters obviously is a good idea. If you've got that economic luxury to pursue masters abroad, so I wouldn't recommend doing it in India. So if you've got that economic luxury, you've got that financial slack to actually go for a masters abroad from a good college, I think there's several good places. And a master's in data science, proper data science would be a good idea as long as you do the necessary homework. So I would recommend going for a small program, understanding and analyzing whether data science is something that you can really do. Because believe me when I say it, when you're talking about a master's in data science, there's a lot of maths that is going to be involved, and there's a lot of programming that is going to be involved as well. So you must make sure that you're able to do it, which means that an elementary level of learning of the entire space would be recommended before you actually go for a master's, if you really want to make the most out of it. What happens with a lot of people is that they enter half-baked with half-baked knowledge. They're not sure exactly what is it that they've got to learn. When they actually get into it, it becomes just another undergraduate program where out of 12th standard, you had absolutely no clue whether you wanted to become a mechanical engineer or you wanted to become a chemical engineer, but you took that because of the rank that you got. That's what happens with most of the people, most of us who were in IITs. I'm sure that's the same thing that happens with other colleges as well. You take a branch just because that's the rank you got, and that's the branch that you could have gotten, which means that most undergraduate courses are wasted for people because they don't really do what they can. They have no idea what they can or cannot do or what they would like to do. Now, when you're going for masters, this is a choice that you have. So make that choice smartly. Do the thorough due diligence that is required. Probably go for a small program that takes you through the basics of everything, or maybe do it yourself. Do some self-learning. Spend maybe 6 months or a year trying to explore the space yourself. If you see that this is something that is worth exploring, a master's is not a bad idea at all, as long as you're doing from abroad and you then pursue work inside that space itself, because those colleges would give you good opportunities in terms of placements and everything, as long as you're going to the good colleges. I think that search again has to be targeted and accurate, but it's a good strategy, especially for people who are relatively young, early in their careers.